Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this, my journey into ecological dynamics and the constraints-led approach. My name is Sam Battlefields and I'll be your host. Listening to a podcast on the way into training today with Preet Mickelson and Kabir Bath. Really good. It's really good sort of hearing these sort of higher level guys essentially going through some of the stuff that I've had to think through. And one of the things early on in the piece, Preet was saying that he was concerned that his approach he was taking wasn't ecological dynamics, despite him saying, I look at it like I'm doing the constraints-led approach. His concern, he did have this concern. I'm reading here, by the way. He said that his concern was that he wasn't sort of strictly ecological dynamics, and I think that he mentioned in a bit later in the podcast that having accessible terminology, and I think that's where I've kind of landed on, not being so. No, it has to be ecological dynamics, Greg Souther's approach, where it's almost solely academic, language-based language that's sort of based on the ecological dynamics sort of thing. I'm not even sure if that is necessarily what's happening. I think that you can simplify some of your language. So, for example, when I've been talking about this quadrant idea where you've got your shoulder quadrants and your hip quadrants, and I've started to sort of think, okay, well, I was writing out a thing today, and I realised it was just opposite quadrant, opposite hip quadrant, or opposite shoulder quadrant, and opposite and near hip quadrant, near shoulder quadrant. So I think I'm going to use that terminology from now on, as I think that it kind of it has that specificity that allows someone to sort of realise what we're talking about. Obviously, I put down what the quadrants mean, but rather than saying this is your first, second, third, and fourth, it's just so you want this knee, this knee to opposite quadrant. So, your knee to an opposite quadrant. Yeah, that's good. Which kind of came out in some of the games today, but I'll get to them in a second. Kabir said that he didn't really get that because he was happy to explain things. And what I mean by that, what he appeared to mean by that is he was happy to, rather than just let something completely emerge with no direction, no instruction, no nothing, he was happy to explain things through. And I think that's kind of a trip up that people are getting, is that they're going, it has to be this very ultra specific way. And but I liked how Kabir sort of broke it down, where he said, what you're trying to do is give the details after they've experienced the problem, right? And this is something that makes sense, because that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to give the solution then provide the problem. We're providing the problem and then workshopping a solution. So essentially that's what this is. I did make a little point in my diary here that saying that I do the constraints-led approach rather than doing ecological dynamics is kind of like saying I do BJJ, I don't do grappling, because ecological dynamics is kind of the framework under which the constraints-led approach derives its framework, essentially. Anyway, that's me trying to be a little bit academic, a little bit more smarter than I actually am. Anyway, something that came up as well that Preet was talking about is maybe having like an ability to simplify the definitions of these things. So I'm pretty keen to do that for my own self, for my own classes, because I think it's very, 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 very good to be able to, as I've mentioned before, get buy-in. And I had a newbie the other day, or he's not new to grappling, but he was new to my classes, and I felt like I explained it well enough. It might not have been simplified enough to my liking, but I explained it well enough, and to the point where the guy Will, I mentioned him on the channel, he got it, and he was able to articulate back to me what I was hoping that he'd pick up, which was great. But I think having a simplified definition for buy-in will be most beneficial. So that's something I'm going to work on personally. Is working on that simplified definition so that I can go from there. I really did like as well that Kabir mentioned that. Preet mentioned that. Greg mentioned that you can provide instruction when there is he kept on saying a one outcome, but I kept on. I looked at it like when there is a singular outcome, i.e., right at this point, the only thing you can do is snap their arm, right? Or the main thing that you can do is snap their arm, unless they get out. You've already got to the platform. You've already isolated the joint. You've already done that. So when someone is, when there is a singular outcome, then instruction is something that may be needed. And I've sort of got to this where I've been talking about, like I'm not trying to teach that end result anymore. Like if you get to a point where you've isolated a limb, there's only so many ways it can turn. So turn it in all the ways that it's not meant to turn. Everyone knows intrinsically that an arm can't extend past that, right? So, well, there is a point where you will start damaging the arm. Same with that way, whatever the case may be, right? Just outing myself to be a noodle arms. This is a really bad angle. I actually look really good at the moment. Anyway, I'm just fucking with you, kind of. Anyway, so let's just go through a quick rundown. So I was looking at. So this week is close guard. Looking at close guard. So stand up was kind of 20%, control 20%, guard 20%. But what I'm trying to do now is have like a thread between them all. So for example, stand up, the game was to try and put the foot on the hip, right? I do want to do a little bit more to this. I don't think it was as strong as it was in my mind when I first implemented it, but it was let's say a week introduction to what's going to be 3 weeks of close guard, because close guard's obviously very a massive part of jiu-jitsu. In this case, I wanted them to have a clinch, to have a collar tie, and in some way, shape or form get that foot on the hip, right? And what I was trying to get them to emerge, was kind of like pulling them around so they kind of had to step away or pull back so you could get it in. So I need to work on my affordances in that respect. That there needs to be something else happening. I just didn't want to initially hit them up with something like, okay, we can both go for this, I wanted them to get comfortable with getting that foot in that position when someone's trying to stop you, essentially. The control, basically, we've just finished side control fortnight, whatever. So what I wanted to do was get the knee to the opposite hip quadrant. Either side, didn't matter, but the goal was to get the knee to the opposite side hip quadrant, right? So whichever side you started on, essentially. Anyway, that's me. And then I've made a nice little note here. Ooh, that sounds great. Opposite hip quadrant, near side hip quadrant. Anyway, so the guard game that we did, because there was 4 people in the class, and we actually did like a rotate in for everyone, because I wanted to get everyone to have a feeling of that. But I think that extended the time a little bit too much. But anyway, it's not too bad. We still got a lot of variance, and that was kind of one of my thought processes. Was we had 4 people there, different sizes, different lengths, all that kind of thing, and and we're essentially variations on a number of different themes. Now, what I was going to do from there, so initially this game was just break posture, and the other person was just trying to maintain posture. And this just went around and actually was a really good game, because we then discussed like what was needed afterwards. Aaron's really good at this, so we looked at the anatomy of Aaron's guard game, essentially. The issue, well, not the issue, but something that came up, which was quite interesting, was during the game, Aaron jumped in and said, "Put your hand here, put your hand." I was like, I was a bit, don't. I'll let him know, don't do that in the future. But the thing that I want them to not succeed in some cases. I want them to experience what not succeeding feels like as well, so that they understand the problem, so that they can then go, okay, what are the solutions, and go searching for themselves, right? So unfortunately, in that case, he put his hand where he needed to. He was able to get his foot through, right? But one of the other things that I could see was Aaron was like, yeah, you just need to do this. Aaron's a tall guy. He's got long limbs, and there is Ridwan, short limbs, who had spoken to me prior and said, I can't latch my feet around. I've got an issue with my ankle at the moment because I tried to hold on too hard, and I've got the short limbs. And so there was a game that I'm going to now put in for tomorrow, for Thursday, because he's back. But essentially, it will be a game that he will benefit from, because he doesn't need to have that closed guard. It will then allow him to open and then attack other ways. But this is one of the issues with teaching something with this linear, I have the answer, here is the solution, right? And then go and find the problem. Yeah, I have the answer. Here is the solution. Go and find the problem. Solution, find problem. So, sorry, I'm just writing down something that I'm going to use in that simplified definition, right? What we're looking to do is, because Aaron's sitting there and he's like, yeah, you just get your and you do this. It's like, but he can't cross his ankles because my stomach is too big. So what's the answer there? Well, it certainly isn't going to be something that you've prescribed before he's felt the problem. Does that make sense? Anyway, it was an interesting day. I'm not knocking Aaron here. It's one of those things that I think is the beauty of this approach, is that, you know, I'm learning through this. I'm now going to take this away, and I'm going to be able to revamp what I'm looking at. I've already, I did have this secondary game ready to go, but we just took a lot longer around it, which is fine. I mean, that's what we needed to do. We needed that variance. But yeah, I think moving forward, that would have. No, I'm happy with how it went. I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me on my ecological dynamics and constraint-led approach journey. See you in the next one.